Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by the newly minted head coach of the Auburn Tigers, Steven Pearl. Steven, welcome. What is it like to be introduced as Auburn's head coach?
Yeah, it's an adjustment for sure. Hasn't really sunk in yet because, as you can imagine, since the 21st, it's just been nonstop, pretty much every day. So haven't really been able to sit back and actually kind of let it sink in. But obviously, it's been a eventful couple of weeks, and it's been fun.
Steven, how would you describe the last couple of weeks from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, don't read too much into it, but it's like drinking out of a fire hose. There's a lot that's coming at you. I think the one positive for me is that having watched Coach do this for so long, I wasn't surprised by any of it, but still, like until you move to that next chair, you really have no idea how to get ready for it until it hits you. So, just diving in head first into everything that comes with it, and I'm fortunate to have a great staff and a great administration that supports me and preps me and just gets me ready for everything I got to do. And obviously, have a brand new team that's excited to grow and learn and continue to build and get better. So yeah, it's been a wild couple of weeks, but I think we're obviously trending in the right direction right now.
What's the biggest thing you know already about being Auburn's head coach that you didn't know when you were an assistant?
Um, I think first and foremost, all decisions kind of run through you now, which is an adjustment, and I think all the things that you hear from like your head coaching buddies, uh, it's a little bit lonelier at the top because, there's not a lot of people that sit in that seat. But what's been really cool for me is I've had a bunch of head coaches just constantly reaching out, just offering support. Brooks Savage, last night called me and like after we lost, and he was like, listen, no one calls after losses, but I'm just calling to check in and just wanted to tell you what like some of my thoughts were. That was cool. I really appreciated that. And it's like obviously Coach Golden, always being there. But a lot of Jake Diebler from Ohio State, like a bunch of people have just been offering support because they know what I'm going through right now. And that's obviously been encouraging, and it's good to know that you have a good group of peers that are willing to help you out right now as I'm making the adjustment.
One of the things coaches have always told me when they went from assistant coach to head coach was how much the time constraints are amplified. How much fuller are your days now as a head coach versus when you were an assistant?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like your schedule just it gets filled for you now, if that makes sense. It's not as much you trying to find ways to be productive, to get ready for your scouting reports, obviously to go through your recruiting. If you're doing anything off the floor when it comes to events or NIL or all that stuff, like you kind of make your schedule. Now it's like you're just constantly being scheduled from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And then in between all those things, you're getting phone calls from your administrators and from different people on campus and your assistant coaches and your players, their parents, recruits, donors. It's just it's just way different. So you feel like you don't have enough hours in the day. But that's when you got to lean on your staff, a staff that obviously I really trust. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like right now, I'll just be totally transparent. Last night for the Oklahoma State game, like I didn't feel as prepared as I usually do because as an assistant, you that's all you spend. That's all you do is you watch film and you game plan it, and you feel like you have a great grasp of what they're doing. Now, part of it is we only had 18 minutes of game film on them, so
Right.
you obviously with 10 new guys, they had the same issue with us. They didn't have a lot of game film on us either, so I just didn't feel nearly as prepared as I normally do. So for me, that's an adjustment. And that's something I gotta make an adjustment in my schedule to be able to spend more time watching film, breaking down the film, so I can help our guys be in better position to be successful.
And life experience shapes all of us. So with more reps, obviously you're going to get more comfortable with that pregame routine. But
For sure.
you've had a lifelong apprenticeship to get ready for this opportunity. I'm curious, what was it like growing up with Bruce Pearl, a famous head coach, as your father?
Yeah, John, it was cool. As a kid growing up in Evansville, Indiana, that's the first time I really remember just kind of being involved as a coach's kid.
Hmm.
And at the time, like I didn't realize like going to work with him, all the things that I would pick up, as far as how he treated different people in the building, whether it be his secretary, a janitor, an administrator, a strength and conditioning coach. He treated everyone as if they were, his associate head coach or his
Right.
boss, just with the utmost respect. All the different things that he would do throughout the day, whether it was going to lunches with different people, going to breakfast with different people throughout the community, raising money in support of cancer or anything that he was really passionate about. Going to Milwaukee and watching him go in the cafeteria and stand on the table and getting students to come out to the games and just all the different things that he would do to obviously build support around the program. I thought that's what every head coach did.
Right.
Shortly after, I mean, you know how this works. Like shortly after getting into the profession, it became very apparent to me that that was not the case at all. And just from like the assistant coaches that were on our staff, like Wes Flanagan, Ira Bowman, some of those guys were telling me like, I've worked for a lot of dudes, like nobody does this, and they've worked for great coaches. So, growing up as a son, obviously I was able to get a front row seat to all the little things that I think really help in building or rebuilding a program, which I think are things that I obviously need to continue to do. My staff needs to continue to do. And then in addition, continue to trust what we're doing on the basketball floor to deliver results.
Stephen, obviously your father's had, an incredible impact on you as both a player and now a coach. But I'm curious, how do you think Stephen Pearl's coaching style might be slightly different than his father's?
Yeah, I think our approaches to the game not to the game, our approaches to our preparation are a little different. I'm a little more data driven, analytically based as far as how I make decisions. And BP is one of those guys that's old school and, he kind of looks at it and he feels like he knows like what needs to be done or an evaluation on a player, so on and so forth. So I think I'm a little more new school in that aspect of things. One of the things that I have to try and work on as a head coach is, my players are going to react to my body language and how I'm conducting myself on the floor. Whereas BP, being a Hall of Fame coach, right, he can be as elevated as he wants, and it's really not going to throw them off because that's what they've come to know him as because they've watched him do it for so long.
Right.
They haven't seen me do any of these things, so I got to obviously I think I got to try and be a little more even keeled when it comes to how I'm coaching on the sidelines. I can't get too wrapped up in the officiating. I can't get too wrapped up in different flows and ebbs and flows of the games. I got to try and stay as positive as I can, but also our guys got to know that when they're not given the effort and energy that's required, especially on the defensive end, they got to let me coach them a little bit. So I think our approach to preparation is a little different. And then obviously in game, I think I got to try and be different than him as far as my fiery approach, because I don't think my guys are going to react as well to me doing it as they did to BP.
Stephen, as you've come up as an assistant, I'm curious, are there any other coaches that you've studied and really, really learned their concepts that you hope to implement here now that you're the head coach at Auburn?
I mean, I think Mark Pope said this, but like he talked about developing his offense a little bit, and he's not afraid to go on Twitter and like see a set and be like, ooh, that's good. Every time I watch film, I'm looking to grow and learn and maybe grab one or two things from each coach. Houston would be a great example of defensively some of the things that I really just love to watch as far as how they rally to the ball, how they really impact the ball and ball screens, how they're always they're always in the right spots, which is why their defense is so elite. And then once a shot goes up, they just go to war. Right. So that'd be a great example of, somebody that I've really, Coach Sampson's someone that I admire so deeply. And, Kelvin and Kellen do an unbelievable job on that staff. And, they're the cream of the crop in college basketball. So defensively, that would be, one of the groups that I've obviously taken a lot of notice to. Rick Barnes has always done such a great job defensively with his teams up at Tennessee. So, but, we have so many good coaches in our league that I feel like every time I watch film in preparation for a game, I'm learning something different every single time that I can add to what we do to try and continue to improve what we're doing.
Stephen, when did you know that coaching was what you wanted to do for a living?
I mean, probably not until like my second or third year in medical sales. And I didn't even know that it was coaching that I wanted to get back into. Mm-hmm. It was just I wanted to get back into athletics in some capacity. So When I was at Tennessee, like my third, maybe going into my third year of medical sales, I started doing a Sunday morning sports talk radio show with Tennessee Sports Network.
Nice.
It was just 2 hours of me on air by myself, just talking about, whether it was the Vols, basketball, or just national sports in general. So I saw myself wanting to get back into sports in that capacity. And then, as that year went on, I was doing well in medical sales. I was about to kind of branch out and do my own thing. And then BP ultimately got the call about the job down here at Auburn. And, while he spent so much time trying to keep me out of coaching, he asked me, he's like, is this something that you would be interested in? I'm trying to, decide if I want to go down there and rebuild, at the time, I think it was the second worst Power 5 program in college basketball, and TCU was probably the worst at the time. And I was 26 at the time, so I was young enough, I think, to make a change. And just kind of took a chance and came down here, took a pay cut as an assistant strength coach, worked my way up to operations and was the bottom assistant coach, and worked my way up to defensive coordinator, associate head coach. And, here we are as the head coach almost 12 years later.
It's an amazing, amazing journey. Now, I'm sure as you ascended up the Auburn staff, you started to weigh other opportunities in terms of your potential first head coaching job. How unrealistic did you think it was to get a job like Auburn of this caliber as your first head coaching job?
Yeah, I'm fully understanding of the fact that my situation is so unique and so much different than everyone else's. Like, I get that. And I understand that may rub people the wrong way, but I get that the main reason why I had this job is because of who my dad is. But, we also have an unbelievable staff that has been together for a long time that I know is deserving of this opportunity. And it's way less about me and more about them. I will say this, though. I mean, BP obviously has had a lot of success. He had a lot of success at Tennessee, but this staff's been to 2 Final Fours and won 5 SEC championships. That doesn't happen without a great collection, a great group of people, which is why ultimately I believe Jon and his administration felt like this was the right move as far as who was going to succeed BP. So, while I did have opportunities to, go elsewhere, I felt like one, I love it in Auburn. My wife loves it in Auburn. Our daughter doesn't know it well enough because she's 10 months, but I think she loves it in Auburn. And you can see the coaching staff too. I mean, Ira Bowman's been here for 8 years. He's had a ton of opportunities to go be a head coach. You know that. Mike Burgermaster is one of the rising up and coming guys in all of college basketball as far as the offensive minds go. We've had a lot of coaches that have had chances to leave and they just haven't because this is a special place. So I was in no rush to leave unless it was like the perfect opportunity. But I also realized that, if we continued to win, there was a scenario potentially where this could happen. Now, obviously, I didn't know about it until BP ultimately decided to step down. But, I felt like I had to take a chance and ride this thing out as long as possible because, ultimately, if it didn't work out, like I was going to be able to find a job or hell, come work for you at CBS. Who knows? I would have figured something out. But, I just felt like the amount of time that we had put in, I wanted to see this thing through and, see if this was a potential opportunity.
Well, when was the moment that you first realized that not only is Bruce Pearl going to retire, but I'm going to have a chance to replace him?
So, BP told John Cohen, our AD, 3 years ago, he's like, listen, like, I don't know how much longer I'm going to do this. So John's been aware that, this could happen in the next couple of years for about 3 years now. So John, in his own way with his close team has kind of gone through all the scenarios as far as what that looks like.
Yeah.
Do we bring in an outside coaching staff and an outside coach? Do we look to hire within? And then ultimately 2 weeks before, BP made the announcement on the 22nd, he told John, listen, I'm getting closer to, maybe being done. I need 2 weeks to kind of think this thing through. So at that point, John was able to get with his team and plan for both scenarios. And then, at that point, I was just kind of getting prepared internally for both. Like, am I going to be looking for a job in a few weeks?
Right.
Am I going to be leading this program in a few weeks? Or am I going to be BP's associate head coach in a few weeks? And then, BP called John that morning on the 21st on that Sunday and told him what his decision was. And that's when, a few hours later, I was made aware that this is what John was going to decide to do. And that's when it all kind of sunk in that, it here we go.
And you had your dress rehearsal for the first time last night as Auburn's head coach. It was Wednesday night. What are your impressions of the Tigers after playing a very, very good Oklahoma State team in Birmingham?
Yeah, I mean, it was that's why you play these scrimmages, and I know you're a huge proponent of streaming them online so
Yes,
you can
huge,
watch them. So
huge.
I'm obviously glad we were able to do that. Was a great turnout. We had 2,500 people in a really cool auditorium. So 10 new guys on a roster, one returning player from last year. But similar to Oklahoma State, they had those same types of roster turnover as well. Coach Lutz feels really good about, the guys that he brought in. They were a little shorthanded at the same time, and they still had three guards that, put up big numbers against us. The reason why we play those games is to kind of learn where we're at this point in the season. And I'm really happy that we did it October 15th and not like October 28th, a week before the season, because we now have 2 weeks, right, to, get through this film. I went through the defense today. I have 74 clips that I have to show the guys today.
Wow.
So it's going to be great. It's going to be a great learning tape for us to kind of see where we're at. And I think one of the encouraging parts of going through last night is I watched the film, and I think a lot of the mistakes that we made are correctable. It wasn't a lack of effort. It wasn't a lack of energy. It was just a lack to attention to detail as far as knowing which way these guys like to drive. They drove it left downhill the entire game. And that's something that I think we can control. And any time that we sent them right, they didn't finish as high of a rate as they did. I think their guards played really well. They made some tough shots. Roy is probably we told our guys he plays best against high major opponents. He's one of the best scorers in the country, and there's a reason why he averaged 26 points a game, but also shot like 50% from the field and 40-something% from three and 80% from the line. This dude is one of the most elite scorers in the country right now. So he's going to have a great year for them. They had a couple of really, really veteran guards that just made plays, big play after big play. But I think there's a lot of things that we can obviously clean up on both ends of the floor. Offensively, a lot of what I expected. First time you play in front of fans, some of the structure that you put in offensively kind of goes out the window because they're trying to feel things out. And, we took a lot of, we call them hush shots, and that's basically shots without any rebounding position. And what that did was that then led to transition, and they scored 35 points in transition. And then they scored 31 points when we guarded the incorrect hand. So I think there's a lot of things that we can correct and build on from it. And it's going to be a great film for us to learn from and grow from.
You referenced all the new players that you have. One player who isn't new is Tahaad Pettiford, who obviously was great last year in the NCAA tournament when you advanced to the Final Four. Now that he's back and will be, in a different type of role, what do you envision in terms of the spike in his production this year as Auburn's obviously primary person at the point of attack?
Yeah, Tahaad obviously is going to have a target on his back because, he's going to be the main guy in the scouting report now as opposed to the sixth man on the best team in college basketball, right? So he's got to figure out how to handle that, as a leader. And I think, Tahaad is in, a place right now where he's got to continue to mature and to grow and to continue to trust his teammates. And, he had a rough shooting night last night. He was, I think, 4 for 16, but I would say of the 16 shots he took, like I was really happy with almost every single one of them. They're all shots that we trust Tahaad to take and to make, and they just didn't fall last night. So that's going to happen sometimes, and then it's on the rest of those guys to kind of pick up the slack. So offensively, not as concerned. I just think he's got to find a way off the floor to continue to lead in a positive manner because he's the one returner. So naturally, all the guys are going to look to him to kind of see, how things are done here, right? And, that's something that Tahaad's got to continue to grow on. And then, on the floor, just continuing to trust his teammates because he's going to need them during the year because, let's face it, he's going to be the top of every scouting report, right? So he's got a phenomenal opportunity. In spite of a first-year head coach and 10 new guys, if and when Auburn has a good season this year, he's going to get a ton of a ton of that credit.
Yeah.
So I think for him, it's very unique. He can really show a lot of NBA GMs and a lot of NBA scouts how much he's grown as a player. And, if he leads this group in a positive, constructive way.
Now, there's a number of newcomers on Auburn's roster. Obviously, the one that everybody puts in bold print is Keyshawn Hall, who led the Big 12 in scoring last year at UCF. Other than Keyshawn Hall, who's obviously a known commodity in college basketball, which other of your newcomers do you anticipate are going to have the biggest impact for Auburn this year?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Key was really good last night. You kind of saw late in the game when we needed a few buckets, like he put us he put us on his back, and he, got us to overtime, and damn near won us the game. So he's going to be obviously phenomenal for us offensively. You look at Elijah Freeman, a Division II transfer from Lincoln Memorial, has all the tools and abilities to be really good, and plays with a lot of confidence. His whole thing is just continuing to get used to this level, continuing to make disciplined decisions. He had a couple of bad fouls last night, which were a little undisciplined for him, but that's to be expected. That's the best part about doing that is, we can watch it and you can see it and be like, and he'll be the first one to be like, God, that was a silly mistake.
Yeah.
But athletically, he's an elite athlete. He can fly, get up and down the floor. He's a great rebounder. And when he starts shooting it with some confidence, he's got a chance to have a really high ceiling for us. Sebastian Williams Adams, just continue to be so impressed with him. He's a physical specimen. Every time a shot goes up, he's flying to the boards. I just love what he brings to us from a toughness standpoint, from an energy standpoint. He's just got to, find ways to continue to have his motor run the entire time he's out there and not take a few possessions off here and there. But he's a guy that's just going to continue to improve and grow with this team. Yeah. And he's going to be really an important X factor for our group. Kevin Overton from Texas Tech, a guy that, was a 3-and-D guy a year ago. I think defensively he's got to continue to get better as far as guarding the ball one-on-one. Offensively, his game has gotten better, so he's doing more than just shooting open threes. He's able to get to the rim and finish through contact. So, and then Keyshawn Murphy from Mississippi State, all guys that, when healthy, have a chance to be good for us. It's just, last night was the first time we played in a game with all those guys, and they're all still trying to feel each other out. And I think, as the year goes on, we talked about this, we're going to continue to get better each week. And, I think the product on the floor will continue to get better as we go.
And obviously, you're going to have them ready. You can obviously tell your meticulousness that you have 74 clips ready for your team to watch later today. But I'm curious, we've seen in sports, everybody always say, well, you never want to be the guy that follows the guy. You're going to be the guy who follows Bruce Pearl at Auburn. How does the pressure of following your father as the head coach at Auburn compare to the internal pressure that you put on yourself to do the job at a high level?
Yeah, I mean, I'm my own biggest critic. So I think the pressure I put on myself to perform and to grow and to get better, is going to be, I mean, obviously the external pressure is a little different because it's so nationally publicized, right? If that makes sense. Yeah. But, I put a ton of pressure on myself, not just, when I was a player at Tennessee to show that I belong, but, also as a coach to show that, I'm not just here because of my last name. Right. Right. I work my tail off. I'm prepared. I was our defensive coordinator the last 4 years, and we've been average top 10 all 4 of those years. So it's something that, I'm passionate about. It's something I love to do. I love getting our guys ready with game planning and execution and things along those lines. But obviously when you slide it 8 inches over, the pressure is different. But, what gives me tremendous confidence, and I may be beating the drum here too much, but my staff is what gives me tremendous confidence that they're always going to have my back for my shortcomings. And, I'm obviously going to have theirs, and anything I can do to pick up their slack. So it's pressure, but it's good pressure. I mean, if you can't, it's the once in a lifetime opportunity, so yeah. I'd be crazy if I let that be the reason why I couldn't execute or perform what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. You gotta welcome that every single day, because it's an honor to have that on you. And to be able to do everything you got to do to go out there and get the job done.
And Billie Jean King did say once that pressure is a privilege. So we're seeing that obviously in this situation. Now, I don't know what your drink of choice is, but I'm curious how much of it you sampled when you saw your non-conference schedule, because I've said this and I think it's a fact. This is the hardest non-conference schedule in the history of college basketball for a first-time head coach. Houston and Birmingham, Michigan and Oregon in the players era, plus another game that's TBD. NC State in the ACC SEC Challenge, at Arizona, Purdue and Indianapolis. I mean, how do you sleep knowing that this is coming down the pike?
Yeah, I mean, uh, we always it's I give Mike Burgermaster a lot of crap, and he's like, if I'd known that you were going to be the head coach, I would have scheduled like 2 less games. But
Yeah,
no, I mean, we did it last year. Obviously, it was a different group, and you look at the formula as far as seeding in the NCAA tournament, and you just got to know, you got to trust that process, right? And you can't get so caught up on the end result. So for me, like, as cliche and as corny as it is, like I try and not focus on, going to Purdue, right before
right.
Christmas, playing one of the best teams in the country, or, you know, going to Birmingham and playing Houston. We gotta get ready for Memphis in another scrimmage, right? But then we got Bethune Cookman coming in here. They have 4 high major transfers. Like,
Right.
let's not forget about those first 3 games we got at home with 10 new guys. So I think for me, it's just trying to stay as present as I possibly can in what we're doing in our day to day. And if I continue to do that, I think the end result will take care of itself.
Stephen, you've been a massive part of this Auburn resurgence. Which loss in the Final Four hits harder, Virginia in 2019 or last year against Florida?
I would say Virginia in 2019 because I felt like in 2019, like that team did everything they could to be in that game and stay in that game for as long as they did. Obviously, our best player had torn his ACL 2 games prior. I felt like that group really battled, and obviously, we all know what happened at the end. There were some controllable things, but at the same time, there was also some things that were out of our control, and that had some impact on the game. If Samir Dowdy hadn't stood up in the stacks on a baseline runner, he potentially gets there and contests that shot a little bit easier. Or Jared Harper, who had made I think 17 or 18 straight free throws, makes that second free throw. The game's a little different.
Right.
Don't let the officials have the ability at the end of the game to impact the game, right? So I feel like we did everything we could in that game to be in the position that we were in, and the way it ended obviously was heartbreaking. I thought the Florida game, like I thought, it was a lot of controllable things that we turned the ball over 10 times in the second half.
Yeah.
Now while I think Florida, had something to do with that, like I still think, we talked about it at halftime. Like we got to do a good job of, we scored 48 points in the first half. I think we had one turnover. That's why we got a shot up before we turned it over. And Florida is
Right.
so damn good in transition that if you turn the ball over, Walt's going to get out in transition and do exactly what he did and just tear us apart. And as soon as he got a little bit of confidence, you saw some of the shots he made in that game. As soon as he got going, obviously it was really hard to reel it back in. And yet and still, we still had multiple chances to win the game. So I think 2019 was tougher because, I thought we did everything we could to be in that game with the best team in the country in Virginia. And I thought in 2024, a lot of things were, in our control that we allowed to get away from us, which, Florida did a great job of taking advantage of.
Other than the Final Four losses, give me another loss that kind of lingers with you throughout your career as a player or coach, or obviously, in addition to that, a great win and a great loss, either as a player or as a coach that you hold near and dear to your heart.
I mean, as a player, I look back to Michigan State in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, so
We,
close.
yeah, I mean,
So
1 point
close.
away, like JP Prince looks like he gets all ball, but he slaps down. So the referee, it was a violent move. So he called the foul and they get 2 free throws. And we had missed I think the front end of a 1-on-1, the possession before. So, you know, had a chance to go to Tennessee's only Final Four ever. At the time, it was the furthest any Tennessee team had ever gone to the Elite Eight. And obviously they've been to, I think, 2 since then, which is, Coach Barnes is doing a hell of a job over there. So that one as a player really sticks out. And then, a great win. Man, that 2019 SEC tournament championship, and we played Tennessee, who I thought was the best team in the country at the time.
Yeah.
And, we probably played our most complete game. And, I think we won by 20 points. That was one of the coolest games that as a coach I've ever been a part of, just to be able to fully execute on both ends of the floor for 40 minutes against an unbelievable team in basically a road environment in Nashville, Tennessee. That's one that I think I'll always remember.
Well, making memories is obviously the dream and the goal of every head coach. How do you put Auburn in position once again to be a quality seed in the NCAA tournament in 2026 with a chance to advance deep in the bracket?
Yeah, I think for us, it's just, continuing to stay true to what we do every single day, stay true to our process. Like, we can't get too caught up in the end result, because here's the deal. Like, we're going to lose some games in the non-conference. Like, that's just the nature of the beast. And that's why we play the schedule that we play. So, and then if we win a few of those games, we can't get too high. So you can't get too high. You can't get too low. You just got to stay really locked into what we're doing every single day to try and grow and improve. And if we do that, I feel like we'll continue to get better. Our non-conference schedule will help us get ready for an unbelievable SEC conference schedule once again. And then ultimately, by the time we get to the NCAA tournament, we're not going to face anything that we haven't faced for the 3 or 4 months prior. So just continue to stay stuck in what we're doing every single day. Stay committed to the process, and the end result will take care of itself.
That's Stephen Pearl, new head coach at Auburn. Stephen, know how busy you are. Appreciate a couple minutes, and as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
All right, JR. Appreciate you, brother.
You got it. That again is Auburn head coach Stephen Pearl. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.